This girl's story is simply shocking. Just imagine she was sitting on a chain in a deep forest and living in a doghouse. She had no arms or legs and was pregnant by her stepfather. And all this horror was done to her by her own mother. Where is she today? This story took place in the deep Siberian forests. This is a harsh region where it is frosty most of the time. There are many wild animals and very few people because most will not survive in such difficult conditions. However, some people were ready to live in the taiga. They were called Old Believers, Eastern Orthodox Christians. They didn't recognize the state, society, medicine, and education. Therefore, they lived away from big cities and villages. The Merzlakovs were such a family. The Siberian taiga became an excellent place for them since no one there imposed their own rules on them. They built a wooden house and got food through hard work, hunting animals, fishing, and picking mushrooms and berries. Every day was a struggle for survival. They didn't use medicine and their children didn't attend school. This was very strange for the Soviet Union, where education was compulsory. But the state turned a blind eye to the Old Believers and allowed them to disobey universal laws. It is difficult to say exactly what years these events occurred, since the family did not use a calendar and counted time by sunrises and sunsets. Therefore, the mother didn't even know her children's exact dates of birth. We can only assume that this shocking story occurred around the 80s of the last century in the Soviet Union, and it became widely known in the late 90s, when a lot was written about this case in the newspapers. But the heroine of this story is still alive and even sometimes goes to the Russian TV shows. Her name is Dusia Merzlakova. She was the second child in her family. There were 5 kids in total, but the youngest 2 died because the mother did not seek medical help. Dusia's father also died for unknown reasons, and the girl's mother, Pelageya, remarried. Stepfather Guryan treated Dusia and her siblings well. He taught kids how to survive in the forest. But even despite this, when Dusia was 15 years old, a great misfortune happened to her. One day she went into the forest and got lost. In October, this region is already experiencing harsh winter. The girl was caught in an intense snowstorm and could not return home. She made herself a shelter in the snow and waited 3 days for someone to find her. Fortunately, on the 3rd day, Dusia was found. Her stepfather brought her home and tried to warm her up. The girl got severe frostbite on her hands and feet. But her mother did not send her to the doctor, and actually, this woman did not feel much love for her daughter. In this harsh world, it was not customary to show tenderness and mercy. The girl stayed home in this state for about 2-3 weeks. Every day her condition became worse, and she could have died from gangrene. The girl's frostbitten dry hands and feet fell off like dry tree branches. It is difficult to imagine what unbearable pain Dusia experienced at that moment. As an anesthesia, she was given strong alcohol to the point of unconsciousness. Dusia came to her senses already in the hospital, as her parents still had to send her for treatment. Luckily, hunters passed by their house and called a medical helicopter. In the hospital, Dusia performed several operations to form the stumps of her arms and legs. She spent about 6 months there. Life in the hospital seemed like heaven on earth to the girl. There she saw toys and television for the first time in her life and received regular food. However, during all this time, the mother never visited her daughter, and the girl probably did not hope for this since she was used to her mother never giving her maternal love. When Dusia returned home, her mother's attitude towards her worsened. The girl was disabled, lost her arms and legs, and could no longer work as before, cleaning the house and picking mushrooms and berries in the forest. The mother could hardly tolerate her useless oldest daughter. But her stepfather Guryan did not let the girl be offended. He took upon himself all the concerns about her health, while her mother ignored her daughter. This went on for several years until another tragedy happened in this family. Dusa's stepfather and older brother had a severe fight. As a result, Guryan was killed, and her brother went to prison for several years. The girl stayed with her mother, for whom she was always a burden. The woman could not stand that Dusa only ate and slept and did not benefit the family, so the mother sent her daughter to a state institution for disabled people. Dusa lived there for about 6 months and received good care. She remembers that time as the happiest in her life. Living with strangers was better for her than living with her mother in harsh conditions. But this happy moment in the girl's life did not last long. Mother Pelagia realized that her farm had fallen into despair after the death of her husband. Therefore, she returned her daughter home to apply for a state pension and receive at least some money, so Dusa had to return home. From that moment, Dusa's life became unbearable. Her mother remarried and had drunken parties with her new husband. At that moment, she kicked Dusa out of the house. When the girl came home to eat, Pelagia was very angry. To prevent her daughter from stealing food, she put her on a chain and forced her to live in a doghouse on the street. Poor Dusa had to live in this situation for more than 10 years. She ate various leftovers and slept on the ground. But the worst thing is that Dusa's new stepfather slept with her, and her mother ignored it. Thus, the girl became pregnant and gave birth to a son, Ivan. Of course, she and the child were sometimes allowed into the house to warm up. After all, if she spent all her time outside in the cold, the most likely would have died. But her mother was fierce. During the next drunken party, she again kicked her daughter and grandson out of the home. The disabled girl and her son had to spend days and nights in a doghouse. All this time, Pelagia was receiving her daughter's disability pension and spent it on alcohol and her new husband. One day, the woman realized this money was insufficient for her. Then she figured out how else she could use Dusa for her benefit. Since then, Pelagia was invited random hunters passing by to stop for the night. Evil mother allowed them to spend the night with her daughter, and in return asked for some money or at least a bottle of alcoholic drink. Men who had not seen their wives for a long time happily agreed to this. After such treatment, Dusa lost her mind, but the mother did not care much about this and kept her daughter on a chain like a dog. The worst thing about this story is that many people knew about the existence of this family and Dusa's plight, but did not attempt to help the poor girl. Random hunters continued to mistreat her. Dusa's son Ivan grew up and ran into the house to ask for food. Then the evil grandmother put him on a chain too. The boy was placed in a nearby doghouse. Mother and son sat on a chain at a considerable distance from each other, so that Ivan could not untie his mother. They sat in the yard, looked at each other, and could not even hug and be together. How cruel! One lucky incident helped Dusa finally escape from this terrible place. One day she had to be admitted to the hospital again. There, an elderly woman, Anastasia Gorchinyova, learned her story. She decided to take the poor girl to her home. Dusa's mother was not against it, but only on one condition: she wanted to continue to receive her pension. Due to bureaucracy, removing Dusa from her mother's hands took almost 6 months. However, the kind woman eventually achieved her goal. She took the disabled girl and her son for herself. At that moment, Dusa felt like she was in heaven on earth again. For the first time in many years, she and her son slept on beds. and ate not from the ground like dogs, but from plates. Dusa's mother was happy that she got rid of the burden. She visited her daughter in her new home only once, when she needed to renew her pension. However, the old woman could not care for Dusa and her son for long. After all, she became increasingly weak every day due to old age. Ivan turned out to be a completely wild and uncontrollable kid. He had to be placed in an orphanage. Dusa was also put in a state institution for disabled people. But she likes living there. Compared to the doghouse where her mother kept her, this is a fabulous place. Dusa still lives there today. She recently took part in a TV show where she said that she feels great in a home for the disabled. She also described how her mother kept her on a chain and gave her to random men for use. Dusa met with her son Ivan, who is already more than 20 years old, on the TV show. He left the orphanage and started an independent life. Now he has a common-law wife. However, the guy is not well settled in life. He does not have an education, a typical job, or a regular income, so he cannot yet take his mother home, but he dreams about it. Dusa loves and hugs her son. The guy sometimes visits her in a home for the disabled, and every time she is pleased about these moments. By the way, Dusa's mother and stepfather were never punished according to the law. However, life punished them for their atrocities. They died under unknown circumstances. And this is not surprising because they led a wild lifestyle. By the way, many people are skeptical of Dusa's statements. They believe that she could have made it all up because she was mentally retarded and was under a lot of stress. Indeed, how, for example, could she survive in a doghouse in Siberia with her son in severe cold? Perhaps the disabled girl exaggerated in some ways, but only because she wanted to move to better conditions than life in the forest. Even if she was not chained or only occasionally when her parents had drunken parties, in any case her life there was unbearable. Also, journalists found no witnesses who could confirm that they saw the girl on a chain. However, it is unlikely that any of the people who saw this would be able to admit it. It's embarrassing to confess that you visited a girl in a doghouse and did nothing to free her. It's much easier to say you did not see anything in this case. At least that's how most local people behave. The horror of this situation is that many knew about the plight of Dusa and her son but did nothing to help, and this is absolute evil.